In 1888, settlers in Woonsocket, South Dakota drove a 6-inch pipe into the earth, and 8,000 gallons per minute erupted skyward at 250 pounds of pressure. A drought-stricken frontier town became a national sensation overnight. Then they drilled thousands more wells. By the 20th century, the aquifer that seemed limitless was dying. To understand why, you have to go back to the desperation that started it all. Tens of thousands of families crossed the Missouri River in the 1880s, drawn by the promise of land and a new beginning. The Homestead Act dangled 160 acres to anyone willing to stake a claim and endure 5 years of prairie hardship. In a single decade, Dakota's territory's population leapt from just over 10,000 to nearly 100,000, as railroads carved new towns into the grasslands and hopeful settlers built sod houses on open range. But the land they rushed to was unforgiving. By 1886, the skies had stopped delivering. Rainfall plummeted across eastern South Dakota, dropping to nearly half the usual amount. In places like Sioux Falls and Yankton, annual totals barely reached a foot. Wheat fields shriveled, pastures turned to dust. By 1887, government weather logs recorded only 11 inches of rain in some counties, less than half the amount needed for crops to survive. The newspapers called it a famine. Families watched 5 years of labour vanish in a single season. The drought did not break. For 4 years the sun burned relentlessly, and the wind stripped away what little topsoil remained. Crop failures became routine. Some packed up wagons and left, but most stayed, trapped by debt and hope. With rivers drying and shallow wells turning brackish, the only chance left was to drill deeper, far deeper than any settler had ever dared before. In 1882, the Chicago, Milwaukee and St. Paul Railway set its sights on Aberdeen, a growing hub on the Dakota Plains. The company needed a steady water supply for its locomotives, but shallow wells had run to dry and the drought showed no sign of ending. Railroad engineers decided to gamble on something unproven, drilling through hundreds of feet of clay and shale, hoping to reach an ancient layer of sandstone rumoured to hold trapped water under pressure. Crews worked for weeks, lowering iron pipe deeper than any well into the region. When their drill finally broke through to the Dakota sandstone, water surged up the pipe and spilled across the prairie. The flow was strong enough to supply the railway's thirsty engines, and then some. That sudden surge became a moment of discovery. Word spread quickly. If the railway could tap a hidden river beneath the earth, perhaps towns and farms could do the same. Aberdeen's success became a turning point, quietly proving that high-pressure water was within reach, not just for industry, but for anyone desperate enough to drill deep. The railway's calculated risk didn't just keep the trains running, it convinced a region that survival might be possible, even when the skies refused to cooperate. Corporate memos and early drilling logs from the Milwaukee Road captured the moment, a technical breakthrough born from necessity that transformed what people believed was possible beneath the Dakota soil. Deep beneath the plains of eastern South Dakota, a layer of sandstone holds the key to the region's most astonishing water eruptions. The Dakota sandstone stretches for hundreds of miles, wedged between thick, nearly impermeable shales above and below. Rain and snowmelt from the distant Black Hills seep into the rock at higher elevations, slowly filtering downward and eastward. Over decades, this water accumulates, trapped by the confining layers and unable to escape upward, except where humans pierce the seal. State hydrogeologists describe this as a classic confined aquifer system. The pressure inside builds because the water's surface, what geologists call the potentiometric head, stands far above the land in the east. In some places, the head rises hundreds of feet higher than the ground itself, thanks to the sloping rock layers and the steady push from Black Hills recharge. The result is a vast underground reservoir under tension, like a spring waiting to be released. When a well bores through the overlying shale, the pressure finds an outlet. Water surges upward with force, often shooting out of the ground in spectacular fashion. This mechanism explains why a simple iron pipe could unleash a geyser, transforming the act of drilling from a gamble into a moment of engineering triumph. But the same conditions that made these eruptions possible also set limits. Recharge from the Black Hills is slow. and the pressure that builds over centuries can be spent in just a few years of heavy use. In the summer of 1888, Woonsocket, South Dakota, became the unlikely stage for a spectacle that stunned the region. Townsfolk gathered in anticipation as workers finished lowering a 6-inch iron pipe more than 1,000 feet into the earth. When the final layer of shale gave way, water exploded upward with a force no one had seen before. The jet soared nearly 100 feet above the prairie, catching sunlight and scattering mist across the crowd. Newspapers described the rush as thunderous, a geyser that rivaled anything in Yellowstone. At its peak, the well poured out over 8,000 gallons every minute, under a pressure measured at 153 pounds per square inch. The roar could be heard for blocks. Reporters and tourists arrived by rail to witness the phenomenon, standing in awe as the town's new fountain dwarfed church steeples and windmills. Woonsocket quickly earned the nickname the town with the Geyser, its name printed in headlines from Minneapolis to Chicago. For a brief moment, the community felt invincible, as if the prairie itself had answered their prayers with a display of abundance no one thought possible. Woonsocket's geyser didn't just quench thirst, it transformed the town into a destination. Within weeks, trains unloaded visitors, eager to see the spectacle that newspapers called the world's greatest artesian well. Local promoters seized the moment, printing postcards and boasting that Woonsocket had a fountain to rival Europe's finest. The town's main street filled with travellers snapping photos, while children sold lemonade to crowds gathered on the boardwalk. The well's overflow was too much to waste, so townsfolk engineered a shallow basin just south of the eruption. Soon the water pooled into a shimmering lake, Lake Pryor, fed by a continuous plume from the artesian pipe. Fishing boats dotted its surface and Sunday picnics circled the shore. City records from the 1890s show Lake Pryor listed as Woonsocket's proudest feature. Its existence owed entirely to the well. Headlines from Minneapolis to Chicago marveled at a prairie town blessed by nature's own fountain. For a few years, Woonsocket's identity was inseparable from the roar and spray of its well, a place where abundance seemed to spring straight from the ground. But beneath the boosterism, a quiet unease lingered. Could such a marvel really last forever? By 1892, the Woonsocket well's roar had faded to a steady hiss. The pressure gauge, once pinned at 153 pounds per square inch, now hovered near 130. Flow rates dropped sharply down to just 1,150 gallons per minute, a fraction of the geyser that once stunned the prairie. Across eastern South Dakota, the same pattern played out. Each new well meant less pressure for the next. By 1906, more than 10,000 artesian wells dotted the region, their combined demand draining the ancient reservoir faster than the Black Hills could refill it. The Woonsocket well, once a marvel, became a problem. Water forced its way through a crack in the casing, leaking at 300 gallons per minute and flooding fields to the south. Municipal records show mounting frustration as engineers tried to control the flow. That July, a contractor named J.H. Jansen arrived with a crew and heavy timbers, tasked with capping the well for good. The job dragged on for days, as pressure fought every attempt to seal the pipe. By the time the last valve was tightened, the town's famous fountain was silent. Hydrographs from the 1920s tell the rest. Average pressure across the region had dropped to just 35 pounds per square inch. By 1958, nearly 15,000 wells tapped the Dakota aquifer, but the era of free-flowing geysers was over, replaced by pumps and memories of a vanished abundance. Today, aquifers across the plains face renewed strain, as water demand outpaces recharge. The illusion of endless abundance still tempts communities and policymakers. What vanished in a single generation warns us, nature's gifts are finite, and depletion, once set in motion, is nearly impossible to reverse. Thanks for watching.